Hey YouTube, I'm doing outstanding and welcome to a book review. Now, because you probably read the title of this video, you already know what I'm reviewing. It's I, Robot. It is one of Isaac Asimov's first. In fact, I'm not sure if it is his first. I can look that up though. Isaac Asimov's first book. Let's find out. Pebble in the Sky. Okay, I was wrong. But I think maybe it was the first robot book. I'm really not sure. No, okay, yes. It is the first book, as far as I understand it, in the Robot series. So they say it's like I, Robot, The Complete Robot, Robot Dreams, and Robot Visions. Then the Bicentennial Man or the Positronic Man, Mother Earth, The Caves of Steel, The Naked Sun, Mirror Image, Robots of Dawn, Robots and Empire, blah blah blah, 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 and so on, right? Anyway, iRobot came out in the year 1950. Can you believe that? 1950. That is such a monumentally long time ago, at least to me. I mean, sure, there are people alive today that were burned then, but just how different the world was. I mean, that was a long time ago. 70 years almost, right? Right? Yes, 20 plus 50 is 70. Believe it or not, that is math. Anyway, so one main thing about how I'm going to be doing these book reviews, because I do plan on doing multiple, is that I am not going to do many edits to them. I want this to be natural. I want this to be... Anybody could do a book review on a book they've never read, so long as they read, some other review of it or something like that, and just use the magic of editing to make it look good. But this video will have no editing because I want to prove that, well, not necessarily prove, I want to show that, one, I really read this book, and two, I really enjoy it. And I want to convey that thought, and that you should read it yourself. Now, I will admit that because this is a book review, there will be spoilers. You can assume that for any amount of book reviews you find. There will always be spoilers, that's just what it is, but that doesn't make the story bad. In fact, especially for The Caves of Steel, I already know how it ends. For reference, if you've never heard of the book, it's another Asimovian one. That is like a murder mystery, right? So I already know who the murderer was. That's not the problem. I still like reading or listening to said book because it's still good, So, anyway, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look at each of the chapters in iRobot. So, iRobot is kind of like an anthology, in a sense, except that it's done really well. A lot of anthologies I don't like because, specifically on Netflix, there's one called Love, Death, Robots, I think. Interesting enough, still robots. And I really liked the first episode. I wanted to see more of that. In fact, for most episodes, I wanted to see more of that thing. What happened next? But they were all unrelated in that particular anthology, and I didn't like that. This anthology is based entirely on a very specific robot, set of robots and rules, but primarily is focused around Susan Calvin. She's being interviewed because she's retiring after 50 years at U.S. Robots. And, she's just trying to tell the interviewer some stories about, what's going on. So the first story we come across is called Robbie. And it's about, I think it occurred in 1996 or 1998. Now, the book was still written in the 1950s, but this story takes place in pretty much the year I was born. Now, the robot named Robbie is kind of like a babysitter for this little girl. I think her name was Gloria or Olivia or something. I just listened to the book earlier today. Gloria. It had to have been Gloria. All right. Anyway, and she's 8 years old, and she's just absolutely in love with this robot. And this is at a point in time where robots are starting to become commonplace, and people are starting to form opinions on them. At first, they were far enough away from humans, they weren't concerned, just like in our real world. But it's kind of a little bit ahead of where we are now in life, where things are certainly concerning. Like people are worrying that they're going to be losing their jobs. So I think it's well, it's not necessarily right now. I think that this particular story would take place in the next 10 years or so, and very well could. I think it is very possible. Anyway, so in this particular case, Gloria, the little girl, definitely loves this robot. It can't even speak yet, which is interesting. It's interesting to see how the 50s thought the 90s would be. Anyway, so this robot, it can't speak, but it's got high resistance coils to keep it warm so that it feels natural to the touch, but it's still made of steel, and it's big and hefty, and it's definitely interesting to see that kind of thing. Anyway, she gets attached to it, she tells it stories, she plays hide and seek, that kind of thing. It's super cute. And, her dad is, perfectly fine with robots, but her mom is I don't know, people are saying things about robots, I don't like robots, I don't trust robots. And so, eventually, the mother convinces the dad to get rid of the robot, and they have to do this, for whatever reason. They're trying not to tell her that they got rid of it. So what they do is, they take her out to a show. By the time they come back, the robot is gone, and there's a puppy sitting there on the porch. She's like, "Oh, what a cute puppy! Is this for me?" And then her dad's like, "Well, yes, very much so." It's like, Robbie's gonna want to meet this puppy. He's like, "Oh, well, we can't find Robbie. He's missing." Right. He walked away. She's like, "Well, we have to go find Robbie," and she just immediately disregards this puppy. And then, her mother is just like, you know what? Kids cry. It's what it is, She'll forget about this in, a couple weeks, right? I mean, it makes sense. I can see that school of thought. Alright. So, 2 weeks go by, and they've had to return the puppy because the kid just absolutely won't even look at it. Hates it. Again, it makes sense in the situation. So, this poor girl lost her best friend, and so months and months go by, and she's still depressed, just absolutely disappointed. And after that, what happens is her father is just like, you know what we should do? Take her to a new world and go to New York City. Get her out of the country. Let her experience something new in life. She's still young. She'll forget about him if she sees something. And on the way there, she's like, I know why we're going to New York. We're going to look for Robbie. And we're going to get, detectives and whatnot. And her mom was livid. She's like, no, fuck you. Not literally in those words, though. She's just like, no, absolutely not. Except it came across as more of a, maybe. But more like, yeah, no. Anyway, so they're walking around and they end up going to the New York Museum of Science and Industry. And there's a robot exhibit going on, and in that exhibit is the very first talking robot. It's very simple. It can only answer certain questions, and only when proposed to it by an engineer who knows how to ask questions. Otherwise, you could kill the brain very easily. It only has the first 3 laws, which, if you don't know what they are, the first law of robotics is a robot may not allow a human being to. A robot may not harm a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. The second command the second law of robotics is that it must obey any commands except if they should go against the first law. So it's not allowed to be. It won't do anything if you ask it to kill another man, because it can't kill another man. And then the third law is preservation of its own life. A robot, may not allow itself to come to harm unless it counteracts the first or second law. So, if it sees, for example, a man about to be crushed by a weight, it would run and push the man out of the way, even if it itself would die by being crushed. Perfectly fine. Or you could command it to shoot itself. Now, these are only very early robots. Later on, there are more... It's still the basic same three laws, but they get twisted in such a way that a robot could even break a man's arm in order to prevent him from shooting somebody else, but only if that was absolutely necessary, you know? But that prevents the positronic brain of the robot to be fried. Anyway, back to what we were saying. So, this little girl is at this Museum of Science and Industry, and she's walking around, and she ends up talking to the robot without an engineer because she walked away from her parents. And I think she was just like, she asked it, have you seen Robbie? And it killed the brain because the brain was like, well, I know that I exist, but are you saying there's more like me? Are you saying that I am not just myself, but I am part of a group? And that just fried the brain. It was a very simple brain, though it took up the size of a room, which makes sense. It's an analogy to computers when they were first starting out, before personal computers and whatnot. So, anyway, so she fries that brain, her parents take her away, blah, 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 and eventually the father goes to the mother and is just like, I've got another idea. All right, what if... So she sees Robbie as a person. She's young, she doesn't know better. What if we could take her to the factory where he's made and show her that he's just a hunk of steel, that's been given a positronic brain. It's not real. She might, get the thought through her head. And the mother was like, all right, fine, nothing I've tried has worked, so let's go. And they go, and they're touring the factory, and then she sees across the factory Robbie. And she's like, Robbie! And she just fucking bolts after this guy. Or after this robot. But what she doesn't see, but everybody else in the situation does see, is that there's like a big machine coming in the way that won't be able to stop before it hits her. And so Robbie's just like, oh shit. And just bolts. Goes and grabs her. Saves her off the track. And saves her life. And at that point, the mother's talking to the father. She's like, you orchestrated this, didn't you? You fucking prick. And I was like, what? Even if I did, he saved her life, so we can't get rid of her now. Or get rid of him now. She's like, God damn it, fine, whatever, fine. And that allows her to keep the robot up until she was like 15 or so. And that's when robots were banned from Earth and started being only a spacer type of thing. But they don't really branch a whole lot into that. In fact, I'll probably be doing a review of the Caves of Steel, which occurs like 3,000 years later, when the Earthers and spacers are completely separated by that point and have kind of evolved in their own way. But that's where Robbie ends the first short story, and we go into the second one, which is Run Around, and that takes place in 2015, the far-off future of 2015. And this is between two guys, Gregory Powell and Michael Donovan. They're on Mercury for whatever reason, and they're trying to make sure that their power generator is working because they need power. But their super fancy brand new robot, Speedy, is just running in circles around a selenium field, or a selenium lake, and they can't figure out why. But if he doesn't get back, they're just gonna die because they won't have energy to, keep shit going. And so they go and they find that they have 6 older robots from the first mission that are about as ancient as, like, before. Well, I think they're slightly after Robbie because they did have the ability to speak, but that was it. And because this was like at a point where people were starting to become afraid of robots, they programmed these robots to have a very, very strong slave complex. And so, like, every time they say anything, it's like always, yes, master, no, master, will do, master, square root of blooded is blooded, master, you get the idea. Anyway, But they had to be piloted. Like, you had to sit in and, like, ride the robot. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to move, which is ridiculous overall. But I can see what they're going for. They're trying to make sure people are like, okay, it's safe, whatever. So, Speedy is, running around the circle, and they try to figure out why, and they end up finding out that he's caught between the second and the third law of robotics, to a point where they're about equal. The command from the guy to go get the selenium was weak. So normally, any command should outrank its own danger. So if I say, hey, go grab that over there, and it's like an alpha emitter, which comes up in the next book, which is something that will kill a robot, he will go over there, he will grab it, and he will bring it to me. But if I just say, go grab that, instead of bring that back to me immediately, then my command was weak, right? And so he will get close to it, and then he'll be like, oh, no, I can't touch it, I'll die. And so he gets locked kind of in a point around it, and that's kind of what happened here, is there was something near the selenium field that would have damaged him. I think it was going to cause rust. And he would have just been stuck. So he's running around the selenium field trying to... Or, I keep calling it a field. It's not a field, it's a selenium lake or something like that. Anyway, so Cutie is trying to... Or, not Cutie, Speedy is running... Cutie is another robot in the story. I'll get to that one. It's not this story, but the next story. Anyway, Speedy's running around trying to avoid the damage, but also trying to get the selenium, and he's kind of caught, and so it puts him in a state where he's kind of drunk. Not the same kind of drunk as humans, but the equivalent in robots, and so like they get up to him, and he's just spouting nonsense. The only way... Well, they try to snap him out of it by putting him in more danger, so that maybe the danger would outrank the command, and he'd come back, but it didn't work. He just found a new route to run around. So they're like, alright, the only way this is going to work is if we put one of us two guys in danger so that he has to save us. And so what they do is they hop in one of these piloting bots, they drive out, and then he hops out of that robot and continues to go further out into like this sunny area where he's most definitely going to die after like 20 minutes no matter what suit he's wearing. He runs out, and Speedy's like, oh, shit, the fuck, run, fuck, save, run. Like, he gets all sorts of fucked up. And then the big hulking motherfucker that he had to ride out there is now coming out and was like, Master, I know I'm not allowed to move when you're not riding me, but you're in danger, so I have to. He's going like 4 miles an hour to Speedy's like 60 miles an hour. Eventually, Speedy's like, whoa, shit, okay, run, grab him. Master, or, I don't think he said master. He might have. He was like, hey man, how the fuck did I get out here? And then, like, I think it might have been Donovan, not Powell, but Donovan had gone out, and he's like, it doesn't matter, man, get me back. And, they run back to base, and he wakes up, well, he passes out on the way there. He wakes up, and, Speedy's like, oh, I don't want to talk to him, he's gonna be mad at me. It was funny, I liked it. Anyway, and that's kind of the end of that story. The next story is called Reason. Half a year later, still on Powell and Donovan, Gregory Powell and Michael Donovan, they're on a space station, and they're with this robot Cutie. They just built him, and they want to see if he can be trusted to take over the management of this space station. Now, what the space station does is ridiculous. It harnesses power from stars and beams it to planets to supply energy to them rather than using, fossil fuels or nuclear energy or any of that. Interesting thought. I don't know how well it would work. I think I've heard that theory before, but man, that'd be fucking crazy, wouldn't it? Anyway, so they're trying to see if they can get Cutie to take over the space station. And the problem is, Cutie doesn't believe that Earth exists. It doesn't believe that humans outside of these guys exist. Simply because he has no evidence of it. There's no evidence except for these guys. He only believes in what he can reason out. And so these guys are like, okay, look out this window. What do you see? It's like, well, I see a black material just on the edge of this window with white lights. He's referring to, the stars. And, sometimes we send a beam to certain lights. It's like, okay, so what if you zoom in on them? So, well, we see slightly zoomed in images of lights. I mean, it doesn't matter. And then the humans are like, well, okay. But what if I told you each of those lights are millions upon millions of miles wide? Basically explosions of light and helium. And they're always like, bullshit, dude. No fucking way, that's not real. What if we told you the one that you're beaming the energy back to is a planet with several million humans on it? Because at this point in time, there are not, 8 billion like we have in the real world. In fact, in the Asimovian world, Earth doesn't have 8 billion people until 3,000 years from now. That's ridiculous. He messed up his numbers there, but I understand. We didn't expect the explosion that we got. Anyway, back to... I remember, man, in middle school we used to say it was 6 billion, so like, just in a small amount of time since elementary school, we've gone to, I think we're technically at 7.7 billion, but I round to 8 anyway, just because it's more relevant to the Caves of Steel. Anyway, where was I? Right. So they're talking to Cutie, and they're trying to convince him that Earth exists, and they're not doing any good, because he's like, a planet? What the fuck is that? People on it? Bullshit. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't add up. And you know what else doesn't add up? I am a robot. Right, that is accurate. I am made of steel. Okay, that's stronger than your skin. Okay, therefore I'm better as far as durability goes, right? I'm smarter than you. Okay, that's accurate. That's been proven. And I'm faster than you. Therefore, I'm better than you. And you couldn't have made me. And the guys are like, shit. We fucked up. And so Cutie starts worshipping this power converter, takes the power in and beams it out. And it becomes like just this religion. And the other robots call him the prophet. And he's like, I'm not worthy. And so at some point the robot goes to them and he's like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to fight you guys on this anymore. You can believe in whatever you want to believe. You're just wrong. Clearly... the almighty thing created you guys in order to create us. Simple as that. And even then, you guys didn't create us, you just put us together off things that he created, so it doesn't count. and so eventually, like, they still have to get the beam to Earth, but there's a problem. There's some sort of like electron storm coming through, and so the beam's not gonna work. If it misses by even a small amount, they're just going to burn the Earth itself with way more energy than the Earth can handle. And eventually Cutie is like messing with the dials and all that, because that's what he was built for, and he gets it perfectly through the storm and out the other side, and doesn't mess up Earth at all. And they're like, well, alright, shit. Doesn't matter if he's crazy, just let him run the place. And then we move on to the next story, Catch That Rabbit, which is another half a year later, so it's got to be like 2016 or so. Powell and Donovan again, or this time they're checking out like a mining robot. I can't remember what his name was, but he's kind of like a hand, and he has like 6 finger robots that he can control, I believe. And anytime there's an emergency and people aren't around, he kind of just stops working and starts marching all of them. And it's just... he only seems to melt down when he has control of all other robots, there are no people around, and an emergency situation happens. So at some point, trying to watch it, Paul and Donovan end up inside of a cave, trying to watch from afar so that they don't know they're being watched. Something happens, like a cave in, and they're like, oh shit. We didn't cave them in. We caved us in. He does see them start doing a marching, because there was still a cave in. He's like, well, they're clearly marching. We're not sure why. And then he shoots one of them in the back, and then, like, all of a sudden he's no longer controlling all 6, he's only controlling 5. And so Dave comes back, and he's like, oh, shit. Shit. You guys alright? Like, no, we're trapped. And then he goes and saves him, he's like, alright, what the hell just happened? Like, I don't know. I just don't know. And so it seems that in that situation, he just kind of resets, and then he starts, because he doesn't know what to do, he just starts, fidgeting, in a sense, by marching. And that's the end of that story. Later on, we go on to a story called Liar. And this takes place in, like, what does it say here? 2021. Now, I am reading off of, I'm not reading a script or anything. What I'm reading is like notes on the chapter so I can formulate my thoughts accurately and not get things as mixed up. Because I guarantee if I tried to do this all from memory, I'd mix it up. Anyway, a robot we named Herbie is unintentionally made with the ability to read minds. Now you can see how that might be bad. That could be very bad. That could be sketchy to give a robot the ability to read minds. And he basically just, because of the first law, he can pretty much only tell people what they want to hear. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. And so, there were 3 questions pretty much posed to him by 3 different people. One was just like, hey man, can you solve this mathematical problem? And because that man wanted to solve the problem for himself and didn't really want the robot to do it, the robot was like, oh man, I don't know shit about mathematics. The second one was, I think, Susan Calvin, the character this book is technically about, asks, like, oh, hey, is my coworker interested in me? And the robot said yes. He was not. And then the third guy, the guy that she wanted to be interested in, was like, oh man, did that guy retire? Or did, my supervisor retire? Or will he retire soon? And so the bot was just like, yeah, dude. Not only is he going to retire soon, but he said you're going to be next in line for his spot. And so he ends up getting in a quarrel with that guy, and he's like, I don't give a shit what you're going to do, man. Like, come on, man. I already know that you're retired. I'm going to be taking your spot. And it's like, dude, no, I haven't retired. Not at all. Not one bit. And then they go and they talk to the robot. She realized the robot's, like, been lying. And then she goes up to it, and she's just trying to be mean to him. So it's like they definitely did want the answer to the math problem, because they're trying to figure out why he has the ability to read minds, but he can't tell them because they have to solve it and so on. So she just walks up and is like, if you don't tell us, you hurt us, right? It's like, yes. But if you tell us, you hurt us, right? Yes. But if you don't tell us, you hurt us. If you tell us, you hurt us. If you don't tell us, you hurt us. If you tell us, you hurt us. And so on and so forth. And she just keeps baiting him and beating him and beating him until he's like literally in a corner crying until he stops entirely and dies. And then they scrap him. It's like, fucker's never going to talk again. So yeah. After that, it goes on to, I don't know why I'm so tired. I'm sorry, guys. Little Lost Robot. And this takes place in 2029. Susan Calvin and Peter Bogart, or Bogart, or whatever, are brought to like a secret military base to find an unstable robot who has an altered version of the first law, because they needed him to complete a certain task in which the first law was difficult because of gamma radiation. Humans can sustain a little bit of gamma radiation and be fine, But these robots see gamma radiation as immediate death, and so they would run in, and then because they have to save the person, but gamma radiation also kills the positronic brain, and so they were just wasting tons of money, and so they had to modify the first law so that they wouldn't. At one point, one of these robots really pisses off one of the workers, and the worker just shouts at him to lose yourself, but he enhances it by calling him all sorts of nasty words that aren't ever detailed in the book. And so he does exactly that. He hides amongst 62 identical robots. And so they run a series of tests to try to, trick him into revealing himself. The first test is they, drop a weight above a guy, and as far as the robots know, it will crush the guy. And so they all run and try to save him. And so what they were hoping for was that because he's thinking differently, I guess, so because the first law is not as strong in him, they thought that he might not instinctively go up and grab him. There might be a slight delay. However, the problem is, in humans, instinctive reactions and normal reactions, there's a huge difference. In robots, there isn't. It's literally the same amount of time, and so they weren't able to catch it. So the second test I did was the same test, weight falling, but this time there's an electric fence in between them. If they touch it, they die. Or so they think, of course. They can tell it's electrified, but what they don't know is, it's weighted so that if you touch it, boom, power off. And so, because they're all in the same room, the one robot that's trying to hide convinces them that if they get up, there's no way to save the human, so he's already dead. And if they die, they can't save a human in the future, so they all stay sitting this time. And that's a very concerning thing when their first law literally says to save somebody. So they weren't able to tell who was this robot that was hiding, and none of the other robots would tell who told them to sit down. And so this time, the third test, what they do is they find out that while the robots are capable of detecting radiation, they're not able to tell what kind it is. Or not radiation, I mean technically. Wavelengths. They can't tell the difference between wavelengths, they can just tell that there are wavelengths. For an example, they can't tell the difference between, gamma rays versus infrared rays. Which is a weird way to say that. Anyway, so what happened was Susan Calvin herself was sitting on this chair with radiation or infrared going around her, and so they told each one of these robots one by one and kept them separate afterwards, gamma radiation will kill you, because apparently that wasn't knowledge they had prior. And so somehow that tricked him into getting up and moving 2 steps before realizing that all the others were still sitting, because he alone knew that he was the only one that knew the difference between IR and gamma. So they were like, that's not good. It's you. And then he runs up to her and tries to choke her out, but his first law is preventing him from actually killing her, and so they blast the room with enough gamma radiation to kill him, but not her, and yeah. That's how they deal with that one. After that is Escape, which is soon after Little Lost Robot, the previous chapter, in which basically they have a... What is it? They have a set of notes for a very specific type of travel that has already killed another company's supercomputer. And it's alright, so we built a really stupid computer. He's super smart, but he's very childlike. He's ignorant to some things. And so it might be easier to convince him to avoid the whatever was causing the problem, which they believe was the death of humans that killed the previous computer. And so they're like, alright, brain. listen, if you find death anywhere in this program, just shoot out the paper. Don't read it, just shoot it out as soon as you think there's death. And so the computer is reading it, and reading it, and eventually it got through all of them. And they're like, what? The fuck? And so, like, they're talking to the brain. The brain's like, yeah, sure, I'll build you this spaceship right now. It'll be able to go through warp. It's like, can you give us more information? Nope. It was definitely, like, it seemed off, and they're like, oh, all right. So we fucked up the brain, but it's not entirely fucked up. So it's not death. It's, like, something else. And so they have to ask very specific questions in order not to kill it. But Powell and Donovan, I believe, I want to confirm. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was Powell and Donovan. They hop on this ship because they want to check it out, and they're looking around like, there's no steering. In fact, there's no food or water or anything. And while they're in there, the door is closed and they've already launched. So they look out the windows and they're in space. And so Susan Calvin back on Earth is like talking to the brain, like, brain, what the fuck? Where the hell did they go? Like, oh, they're going for a ride. And so, eventually, the ship takes like 5 days, and they do find food eventually. Like, they're walking around and like, door opens, there it is. It was beans and milk. That was it. That's all the food they had. Dick move. Anyway. So they're flying, and they go through this warp, and what happens is they sort of die, but not really, because no mass or anything can go over the speed of light. And so they kind of have to not exist in order to move. And so I guess somehow the warp drive does that. It makes them just not exist. But they can feel it. It's very weird. They come back, and it's all good. The next chapter or story is called Evidence. In 2032, a political dude named Francis Quinn accuses his competitor Stephen Byerly of being a robot. Now, at that point in time, there were no humaniform robots. They didn't exist, or so they think. But this guy's like super weird. But they try to convince him, convince people that he's a robot by saying, well, one, he doesn't eat. He never eats. He never sleeps. Like, well, okay. Can you prove that, though? I don't know. Eventually, he does, like, eat an apple, and they're like, well, okay, but you might just be a good robot. But then, they're looking at the laws of robotics, and they're like, well, the first law. Not allowed to kill another man. Well, that's just... Theoretically, no good man would ever kill another man anyway, so he could just be a good man. The second law, following commands, is an interesting one, but he might just be a good man. And very complicated robots don't necessarily have to follow the second command if they believe it could affect the first law at all. And he may just have a very strong third command of protecting himself, which is, again, a very normal thing to do. So yeah, Stephen Byerly, blah blah blah. They try to get, like, a whole bunch of evidence on him, like x-rays, but they're proven time and again that they can't. Yeah, so I guess at some point, at a certain point, there's like a meeting, and like this dude's like getting all up in Byerly's face. It's like, all right, hit me. If you are not a robot, just hit me. And so Byerly fucking hits him. But people later believe that, oh, well, the dude he hit was just a robot. Robots can hit robots. It's just ridiculous. It is clear in the story that Susan Calvin does believe that Byerly is in fact a robot. But there's no actual evidence anywhere in the book, as far as I recall. It's like, well, I don't personally believe he's a robot, because I like to think of Ardenil Olivov from The Caves of Steel as the first humaniform robot, but to each their own. Then the last chapter is The Inevitable Conflict. In 2052, Stephen Byerly, which is now the world coordinator after, countries have kind of split up and become, worlds. Susan Calvin is talking about how, we have the machines doing what they do in order to help people, and pretty much the supercomputers run the world in every way. They run the very economy that we use. And people really shouldn't worry so much about it. But of course, eventually, robots are completely banned from Earth in every fashion, pretty much, except for small things, and spatial wars go on and whatnot. But that's not included here. That's included in other books. And at the end, we get like a tiny little note or what have you from the interviewer, Susan Calvin, who saw robots grow from simple babysitters to like fully running every bit of the world to controlling food and everything. Died at the age of 82 in the year 2064 after like 6 years or so of retirement. So that's iRobot. I think it's a phenomenal book, a great anthology, and it's one of the first robot books. I think it was the first, right? That's what I just went on the internet to find out. I love Isaac Asimov, and I love his books. I strongly suggest, even with my breakdown, that you should read it yourself. Other than that, wow, 41 minutes, holy shit. I've been recording for a while. It's a long book review. I want you guys to pick one of 3 books for me to review next. 1, The Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov. And the basic idea there is Detective Elijah Bailey is paired with our Daniil Oliva, a robot, which is hated on Earth, to investigate a murder. It's pretty great. I love that book, and I love the 2 books that happen afterwards in that series. The other book would be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Absolutely amazing book. If you don't know what it is, it's basically this French researcher and his, I don't want to say slave, but, loyal companion, are searching after this famed narwhal that is so big that it's destroying ships. It's just not possible how big this thing is. It's like some sort of giant electric narwhal, because it's like producing light. They find it, and it turns out to be what is known as the Nautilus. It is a ship. They hop on board, and they travel for 20,000 leagues under the sea, and they see the very northern poles, and a lot of amazing things. And that's a very great read. And the third one will be whatever you choose. Leave a comment down below if you want to see me read a specific book and give you a detailed analysis of it. What I don't like is magic. I don't like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or things like that. I just find it incredibly boring. I'm a very sci-fi kind of guy. So if you suggest those, I'm probably not going to read it. But if you suggest sci-fi, I will find it. War of the Worlds is another really good one, or, God, there's so many. Fahrenheit 451. I also like things like, To Kill a Mockingbird, or Every Tool is a Hammer, or, God, there's just so many. There's a lot of good books. In fact, I just got The Art of War. I'm going to read that one pretty soon here, just because, why not? Anyway, there's so many interesting books. Let me know. Leave a comment down below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, do whatever you want to do. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.